That afternoon, the atmosphere in an open area in the middle of the city felt warm, with clear skies casting a soft tone over every detail of the scene. As Suga was seen wearing an elegant cream-colored suit, holding a fresh bouquet of white Gerber daisies in his hands, smiling gently as if savoring the moment he was in, and the calm look in his eyes made the surroundings feel comfortable. A few people in the area watched with quiet curiosity, while photographers and media personnel who happened to be nearby took the opportunity to capture every movement and expression of the musician. The moment felt like part of a personal journey, where his activity was not just another stage performance or official schedule, but a step that carried emotional value for him. Known as someone who rarely displays his personal side in public, Suga looked relaxed, walking slowly while holding the bouquet carefully, occasionally nodding politely to those who greeted him from afar. His outfit fit him perfectly, with a suit cut that was modern yet classic, giving a formal impression without being excessive, as if to affirm that he wanted to appear well-dressed for a meaningful occasion. Near him, staff members familiar with him kept their distance while ensuring everything went smoothly, allowing Suga to move freely and enjoy the atmosphere. The location chosen was in an area not too crowded, offering enough privacy while still allowing passers-by to watch from a distance, creating a sense of curiosity for anyone who happened to walk by. His slow movements suggested that he wanted to appreciate every second happening at that moment, as if preparing himself for something important. Around him, a few simple decorations could be seen adorning the corners of the location, adding soft colors to a backdrop dominated by neutral tones. The natural afternoon light added warmth to the view, reflecting a gentle shine on his neatly styled black hair. Suga's presence with a bouquet in hand became a rare sight, especially for the public who more often see him in professional settings. All the elements of the place blended into a calm yet meaningful atmosphere, giving the impression that this moment was part of a significant personal journey for him. There were no loud cheers or overwhelming crowds, only a peaceful setting with a quiet sense of curiosity lingering in the air, making anyone watching feel as though they were seeing another side of a star who is usually far from such intimate moments. From the way he held the flowers, the look in his eyes, to the way he stood tall while observing his surroundings, it was clear that this was not just another routine activity, but a moment prepared with full awareness and attention to detail. Everything around him seemed to move in the same rhythm, creating a complete picture of an afternoon that might become an important memory in his life. And for those who were there, they were witnessing something that would always be remembered not for its grandeur, but for the sincerity radiating from every gesture. As the afternoon continued, Suga maintained his calm demeanor, adjusting his grip on the bouquet as he slowly walked toward a neatly arranged spot where a small table with minimal, yet tasteful decorations had been set up, the soft white and cream tones of the flowers and cloth blending seamlessly with the warm shades of his suit. A few members of his team moved discreetly around the area, ensuring that everything remained orderly without drawing unnecessary attention, their quiet efficiency allowing the atmosphere to stay serene and undisturbed. The gentle sound of footsteps on the stone pavement and the distant hum of city life formed a subtle background to the scene, grounding it in the everyday while still holding a quiet sense of significance. Suga's movements were deliberate, each step taken with the kind of care that suggested he was fully present in the moment, aware of both the simplicity and the weight of what he was doing. His expression, though understated, carried a softness that was hard to ignore, a look that seemed to hold both focus and ease. He paused briefly, taking in the surroundings, his gaze moving across the space as if making sure everything was as it should be before continuing. The sunlight, now lower in the sky, filtered gently through the nearby buildings, casting a flattering light across the scene and adding a natural highlight to the clean lines of his attire. Those nearby, whether staff or onlookers, seemed to instinctively match the pace and mood he set, keeping their voices low and movements smooth. This shared understanding created a rare kind of harmony in a public space, the kind that is often hard to achieve in the presence of a public figure. Suga's interaction with the environment was subtle but telling. He adjusted the flowers ever so slightly, his fingers lightly brushing the petals as if to make sure they looked their best. The gesture was not for the cameras, but for the moment itself, an indication of the personal care he was placing into the occasion. As he reached the small arrangement prepared ahead, he set the bouquet down briefly, adjusting its position so that it stood upright and perfectly balanced, the white blooms facing outward in a neat display. He then straightened up, taking a quiet breath, his eyes softening as he looked toward the space ahead. The light wind caught the edges of his suit jacket, giving a subtle movement to his otherwise still figure. This was not a grand spectacle but rather a private chapter unfolding within a public setting, one that felt honest in its simplicity. Every detail, from the unhurried pace to the choice of setting, spoke to an intention that valued authenticity over performance. The people who happened to be present were not participants in a staged event but rather quiet witnesses to a real and grounded moment. The air seemed to hold a gentle anticipation, not in the sense of a surprise, but in the recognition that something meaningful was happening, the kind of moment that does not need noise to leave an impact. Suga's posture remained composed, his attention still on the bouquet before him, and though there was no dramatic display, there was a sense of quiet completion, as if this part of his day had reached exactly the tone and pace he had intended it to. Suga remained in the same spot for a while, his hands now resting gently at his sides, the bouquet still standing neatly on the small table as if it had found its place in the scene, the white petals contrasting softly against the muted background. He shifted his weight slightly, glancing toward a nearby chair that had been placed under the shade of a light canopy, and walked over at the same measured pace, settling into the seat with a quiet ease. The fabric of his suit caught the light as he moved, reflecting a subtle sheen that added to the overall polished look without drawing too much attention. His posture was upright yet relaxed, the kind that conveyed confidence without stiffness, and his gaze remained calm as he took in the surroundings from his new vantage point. Around him, the flow of activity continued at a low hum, team members adjusting minor details in the setup, a photographer discreetly changing angles, and a few passersby slowing their steps to take in the sight before moving on. The setting itself carried a natural elegance, with clean lines and simple colors dominating the space, making the bouquet the most vivid element in view. A soft breeze moved through, shifting a few strands of Suga's hair across his forehead, and he brushed them back with an unhurried gesture before resting his hands loosely in his lap. There was no urgency in his manner, only a steady presence that seemed to influence the pace of everything around him. Occasionally, his gaze would return to the flowers, as if checking that they were still perfectly in place, a subtle sign of the personal connection he had to the moment. The light continued to change gradually, the shadows stretching longer across the ground while the warmth of the day lingered in the air, making the entire scene feel grounded in the present. Each small movement, whether it was him adjusting his seat slightly, reaching for a glass of water on the table beside him, or scanning the horizon, was deliberate yet natural, contributing to the impression that this was not an orchestrated performance but simply part of his day. Even in stillness, there was a quiet energy in how he occupied the space, an understated presence that made the surroundings feel fuller. Those who were there seemed to recognize this, maintaining a respectful distance and refraining from unnecessary interruptions, allowing him to remain in his own rhythm. It was a kind of moment rarely caught in the public eye, one where the subject was neither on stage nor entirely away from it, existing instead in that middle ground where personal and public life meet. The longer he sat there, the more it became clear that this was not about creating a spectacle, but about honoring the small yet significant steps in a personal chapter. When he finally rose from the chair, the movement was as measured as everything else he had done that afternoon, his attention returning to the bouquet as if it was both the centerpiece and the anchor of the scene. He stood beside it again, the same calm expression on his face, and though nothing outwardly dramatic had occurred, the air carried a sense of quiet fulfillment, as if the purpose of his presence there had been fully met in its own understated way. Standing once again beside the bouquet, Suga adjusted his stance so that the flowers were aligned perfectly in front of him, the stems gathered neatly in their wrapping and the white petals still fresh under the soft glow of the late afternoon light. He reached out to lift the bouquet once more, holding it with both hands in a way that seemed both natural and intentional, the kind of gesture that spoke less of performance and more of personal significance. His steps carried him toward a slightly more open area within the same space, where the ground was even and the surrounding elements had been subtly arranged to create a sense of balance. The low hum of background activity persisted, quiet conversations among staff, the faint click of camera shutters, and the distant rhythm of passing footsteps on the pavement beyond the main area. Yet none of it seemed to intrude on the mood he was maintaining. The air was cooler now, carrying with it a gentle breeze that moved lightly through his hair and the edges of his suit jacket, adding a touch of movement to his otherwise composed figure. His gaze remained steady as he paused midway, lifting the bouquet slightly as if to ensure it stayed in perfect form, then continuing until he reached a spot where a small decorative arrangement stood, simple yet thoughtfully placed. He positioned himself just beside it, turning slightly so that the bouquet and the background complemented one another without either overpowering the scene. For a brief moment, he stood still, his eyes scanning the view ahead, perhaps appreciating the way everything had come together at this precise hour. The light, now softer and more diffused, lent a gentle glow to the scene, smoothing every line and softening every shadow. There was a quiet order to the way the setting functioned. No sudden changes, no hurried movements, just a steady rhythm that allowed each action to unfold naturally. He shifted the bouquet to one hand, letting the other rest lightly at his side, a stance that looked effortless yet deliberate. This was not the hurried energy of a schedule being met, but the calm certainty of a moment being lived fully. Those around him continued their quiet roles, keeping the space clear and maintaining the gentle flow that had defined the afternoon from the start. From a distance, the scene might have seemed ordinary. A man in a suit holding flowers in a well-arranged space, but up close, the careful attention to detail, the pacing, and the unspoken connection between the subject and the moment revealed something more layered. It was a portrayal of presence without pretense, a kind of grounded sincerity that is rarely afforded the space to exist in public view. As he remained there, the bouquet cradled securely in his hands, the setting felt complete. Not in the sense of finality, but in the way a chapter feels whole when each part has been given its proper time and place. The balance between movement and stillness, between public visibility and personal intention, had held steady until the very end, leaving the impression of an afternoon that had been shaped not by spectacle, but by the quiet significance of an action carried out with care. With the bouquet still in his hands, Suga began to walk toward a section of the venue where a small path opened into a slightly greener area, the soft grass contrasting against the muted tones of the stone pavement he had just crossed. His steps remained unhurried, his posture consistent, and his eyes occasionally moved to the flowers as though ensuring their arrangement stayed exactly as intended. The late afternoon light had shifted into a warmer hue, touching the edges of his suit and casting a subtle glow along the contours of his face. The gentle wind carried the faint scent of the blooms, blending with the freshness of the surrounding greenery, adding an understated sensory detail to the calm scene. In the periphery, the staff kept their steady, quiet presence, following at a respectful distance without intruding on his space. As he approached a small wooden bench positioned under a neatly pruned tree, Suga paused briefly, then leaned slightly forward to place the bouquet on the bench with careful precision, adjusting its angle so that the petals faced outward in a neat display. His hand lingered for a moment on the stems, pressing them lightly as if to settle them into place, before he straightened and stepped back to observe. The natural shade from the tree created a frame around the flowers, the soft interplay of light and shadow emphasizing their color against the surrounding neutral tones. His gaze stayed on them for a few seconds longer, not with the intensity of a performance, but with the quiet acknowledgement of someone who had given thought to every detail. A faint rustle of leaves overhead and the muted sound of the city beyond the venue served as the only background to the stillness. In this unhurried atmosphere, the purpose of his movement felt clear without requiring any declaration. Each action had flowed into the next with an organic continuity. The absence of urgency allowed every element, from the bouquet to the setting, to settle naturally into place, as though the scene had been allowed to breathe at its own pace. Suga stepped aside slightly, letting the bench and the bouquet stand on their own within the composition of the moment, his presence still near but no longer central to the frame. The air carried a lingering warmth, the kind that often precedes the gradual cooling of evening, and the light had softened to the point where edges blurred gently into their surroundings. There was a completeness to the scene, not because anything dramatic had occurred, but because each part of it had unfolded in alignment with the pace he had set from the beginning. In the quiet that followed, the moment stood as a portrait of intention carried out fully, its significance grounded not in spectacle, but in the sincerity of a gesture allowed to exist without embellishment. Suga remained a short distance from the bench, his gaze steady on the bouquet as the light continued to fade into the softer tones of early evening. The breeze moved gently through the space, carrying with it a calm that seemed to settle over everything. He adjusted the cuff of his sleeve, a small, almost absent gesture, before taking one last slow breath and allowing his eyes to linger on the flowers. Without hurry, he turned and began to walk away along the path he had come from. His steps measured, leaving behind a scene that now stood quietly complete, holding its own meaning in the stillness.